Dart construction is done so that a flat piece of fabric will fit a curved piece of fabric. You are going to start with a pattern piece that looks like this. It has been duplicated on paper, which means that paper scissors need to be used to cut out the pattern piece. The fabric shears are for fabric only and not paper. When you actually begin construction on a garment, the paper that is the tissue for the pattern you actually can use with the scissors or the shears. But for this particular pattern piece, you will want to cut it out of the paper before you pin it onto your fashion fabric. Pinning is critical to the proper fit of a garment. When we pin the fabric with the pattern, the first thing that we want to do is to make sure that the fabric is flat on the table or the cutting surface. The bottom piece, you will see, has a long arrow with a long line with 2 points at the end, or an arrow. And that is for you to have the fabric put against the straight of the grain. The grain line runs parallel with the finished edge of your fabric, which is the selvage. The first placement that you are going to want to do when you lay out a piece that has a grain line is to measure either with your seam gauge or your tape measure. And the distance between the bottom arrow and the selvage edge, and the distance between the top arrow and the selvage edge, should be identical. We then want to pin it securely to our fabric. We pin by thrusting our pin down and then up without lifting it off of the table. Every time you lift it off of the table, you take the risk of getting an inaccurate cut. We want to make sure that our pattern pieces are securely pinned to the fabric before we cut. And this is the time that you do not want to be stingy with your pins. You'll notice a number of little symbols, one of which are either single or double symbols that look like a little carrot. Those are called notches, and they are for matching. And so it is important that they not be trimmed off during the cutting process. To ensure that, what you're going to do is to put a pin all the way through the end of the notch, so that as you cut around, if you get your blade of your shears too close, the pin will automatically stop the scissors from going through the fabric and the paper. We put our pins perpendicular to the stitching line. The stitching line is the broken line on your pattern piece. And as we pin, we thrust down, we then thrust up. The pins that I am using are quilting pins. They are much longer than dressmaker pins. I prefer them, although they are very sharp and can make quite an indentation in your skin if you thrust it too hard, but they hold the fabric very nicely. Once the pattern piece is pinned on, then you are going to take your shears, your dressmaker shears, and you are going to cut. When we cut, we want to keep our fashion fabric flat against the table, and we want to use slow, even strokes as we cut. Once everything is securely pinned, then we take our shears, and you'll notice that my shears have been kept in the sheath to keep the blades from damage. We are going to hold the fashion fabric with our left hand if you're right-handed. Obviously, if you're left-handed, you'll do just the opposite. Keep the lower blade of your shears flat against the table and begin to cut slowly and evenly. When you come to the notch, come around it. Consistently keeping your shears flat against the table. When you're cutting out a garment, you will have multiple pattern pieces. And one of the things that you want to remember is to be sure that you keep the pattern piece pinned to your fashion fabric until you are actually ready to use it. Taking it off prematurely can create some challenges that you may not want. The darts are the markings that start with a wide end and have a point at the other end. We need to transfer the pattern marking from the pattern piece to the fashion fabric. To do that, we use what is called dressmaker carbon and a tracing wheel, which looks like a pizza cutter that got loose from the kitchen, but that is not true at all. If you have a double side of fabric, you can save time by folding your carbon paper in half and doing both sides at one time. Normally, the right side of the fabric is folded to the inside of the fabric, and so what we would want to do is to fold the carbon paper so that we are only going through the top side, and then we want to use a gentle pressure to actually make a marking. And you will notice then that the marking comes out on the fashion fabric. To make sure that your darts are carbon marked accurately, use a ruler or your seam gauge. Start at the point and go to the wide end. Stop. Check to see that the carbon paper has actually transferred the marking. If it has not, you'll want to go over it one more time. Your goal is to be able to faintly see the carbon marking on the wrong side of the fabric, but you do not want it so dark that when the fabric is laying flat, it shows through to the right side. We will carbon mark on the broken line, and then we will carbon mark on the center line. Once we have all of our carbon marking done and you have 2 darts for your bodice that you're going to be doing, you have the waist fitting dart and you have the bust fitting dart. We are then ready to unpin the pattern piece and begin to do our stitching. You will take your dart and fold it on the broken line. Since you are just learning how to control the sewing machine, I would encourage you to hand base this dart in. You don't have to do it. You may place your pins perpendicular to the stitching line, but before you actually put them perpendicular to the stitching line, you want to put a pin through one side of the dart and make sure that it's coming out the opposite side where the marking is. Once that is in place, then we go ahead and put our pins perpendicular to the stitching line. We either hand based or go ahead and take it to the sewing machine and begin our stitching. You will start at the wide end of the dart, and just as you did with the seam, you will start up 1/2 inch, go backwards first, and then you will come all the way up to the point of the dart, stop, and pull out your thread several inches, just like you did with your hand gathering. Cut your thread off. Once you have cut the thread off, Then you will go ahead and pull the threads to the wrong side of the dart, which if it's a bust fitting dart, the wrong side is going to be toward the center front. If it's a bust fitting dart, it's going to be on the underside because you are going to press the bust fitting dart down, the waist fitting dart to the center. As with the thread from your seams and from your basting, do not cut it too close. When you are ready to press, you are going to want to get out the dressmaker's ham. We want the curve of the bodice dart that we have just sewn in to remain curved, and so we place the dart over the hem. We press open by giving a little bit of tension with the waist fitting dart going to the center and the bust fitting dart going down. Wrong side we press first, we then flip it to the right side. We fold it out so that it is very smooth. We do not want any kind of a little pucker at the top part of the dart. We press it well, and then you will be ready to place it on your sample.